Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, Trellis and Trails Homestead. I'm Jacqueline. Today we're going to be making some sourdough pizza dough with my sourdough discard. I have several different jars here because I tend to save my discard and they just pile up in the fridge until I use them for something. So I really like to keep a lot of pizza dough on hand. We eat sourdough pizza often at home. I think it's a huge money saver too because pizza is really expensive if you buy it out or get it delivered. So we're gonna make some of that today just for like freezer restock. I have one dough left in the freezer. The recipe, it's not really a recipe, I kind of just came up with my own measurements and stuff, but what I use makes a personal size pizza, like an 8-inch pizza. Usually I'll combine two to make a large one, or we'll just have two separate 8-inch ones. And so that's what we're gonna do today. I only have one of those left in the freezer. The measurements that I use, I double it basically, so we're gonna make 8 personal sized pizza doughs today. I have enough discard that I'm just gonna do this one batch for now, but probably later this week I might even make another batch just to use up some of the rest of this discard. I pretty much save most all of my discards. Sometimes I'll trash it if I just have too much in the fridge. But you can make pretty much anything with this. I've made cinnamon rolls with discard. You can make bagels. I'm gonna do like pie crust with it. So there's lots of uses for your discard. Don't throw your discard away after you feed your starter if you don't use it for the original recipe. So we're gonna get started with this. I have all of my ingredients here. Again, I don't really use a recipe for this. I've tried a bunch of different sourdough pizza crust recipes and I've kind of just combined what I like out of each one into my own. So that's what we're gonna do today. I'm actually adding a couple, well, just the spicy honey. I haven't used that before. I'm gonna add that in instead of like regular honey, just because I think it'll add a really nice flavor to the crust. Like I said, no recipe, so I'll just link in the description measurements that I use for mine. And if you want to try it out, you can kind of test the same measurements, or if you want to switch things up, that's fine too. So let's go ahead and get started with measuring everything, and then we'll be sticking it in our KitchenAid mixer here, mixing it up. All right, so I have my kitchen scale. I like to use the kitchen scale for measuring ingredients instead of using like cups or tablespoons. I really like to do everything in grams. It's just kind of how my mind works the best. So I'm gonna put my mixing bowl on the scale first, and we'll just pour pretty much everything straight into here. So I'm gonna zero the scale with our empty bowl in there, and like I said, I have various jars of sourdough right now. These two, I keep my active sourdough in. I feed them before I make something, and I do like to have them in 2 different jars in case something happens with one of the jars of sourdough. I still have the other one that has live sourdough starter in it. I know some people have their sourdough in like really huge single jars, and they just like scoop and add to that same jar. But I really like to keep mine separate. So this small jar is all discard, and this we're just gonna have to pour some of the discard off, about 100 grams out of each one. So I probably actually don't even need this one right now. I might just use this one later in the week when I make more of the doughs, because I just fed these like 2 days ago. I'm doubling my recipe because I want to make 8 doughs. If I was gonna just do 4 doughs, you can just half these measurements, and that's a pretty standard sort of recipe that you would find, but we are going to double it right now. So we're gonna add in 100 grams of starter out of this jar. It's gonna be 200 grams total of discard, sourdough discard. So there we are, 100 even. I'm gonna get my other jar and add 100 from there as well. I'm gonna bring you guys closer so that you can see everything. Okay, I'm gonna mix in basically all of the like dry ingredients other than the starter, and mix those together first, and then we'll add the water in last, and then we should have a good, nice dough. So I'm just gonna clear my scale out. I'm gonna add in some salt. I just have some coarse kosher salt. So we're gonna do about 20 grams of salt. Again, if you were halving it just to do 4 doughs, you would just do 10. And if you add a little bit more salt, it's really not a big deal. It still turns out okay. We're gonna add some olive oil. I'm gonna do about 60 grams. And we're over a little bit, 61.8 also, not a big deal. It turns out the same. You also add olive oil when you cook it just to the crust so the crust can get crispy, so it's totally fine to have a little bit extra in there. I'm gonna go ahead and add some flour next. So I do a combination of all-purpose flour and whole wheat flour. I like the taste of the whole wheat flour in the pizza dough. We're gonna do the all-purpose flour, more of that one, and then a little less of the whole wheat flour. So I'm gonna put in 200 grams of whole wheat flour. This is a lot of flour, but I kind of buy flour in bulk, so it's okay. So that ended up being $2.19. I poured it out a little fast. We're just gonna go with that. And for all-purpose flour, I'm gonna do 350 per 4 doughs, so 700 grams of all-purpose flour, in addition to the 200 of the whole wheat flour. Oh, we're gonna have a bag here that I wanna use up first. I remember doing this last time and doubling it. It's kind of a lot for my mixer, but it worked out, so we're gonna do the same today. And I might even do just a tad bit less than 700 since I had that extra whole wheat flour in there. So yeah. I'm gonna get these things all mixed together and then we'll come back in and we'll add some water to it. Okay, so we got our flour mixed together with some of the starter and olive oil and salt. I'm gonna go ahead and add some water now. So we are gonna add about 700 grams of water. Before we add in the water, I'm gonna go ahead and add some honey first. This is not in any recipe that I found to add honey to the pizza dough, but I do add honey to my focaccia loaves and it adds, like I said, a really nice flavor. So we're gonna do this spicy honey today, just add a little bit. I'll probably add like 30 grams or so, not a ton, and just add that before we add the water, get it all mixed in together. Okay, so I added 50 grams of the honey. It just looks like that's a better ratio than 30. So we're gonna add the water next. 700 grams of water. Just remember to zero your scale in between your measurements so that you have accurate measurements with these. All right, 700. Okay, we're gonna put this back on the mixer. Like I said, it gets pretty full when you're doubling it, but I've never had a problem with it mixing up before, so I think it'll be fine this time. And we're just gonna mix it until it turns into a dough. Okay, the texture of this is really good. It's not in a dough shape, but it would be if I took it out and kind of kneaded it by hand. I don't want to overmix my dough, so what I'm going to do is let this sit for about 24 hours. I'm going to cover this with a damp cloth and just let it sit. Tonight, actually, so in about, what time is it? About 8 hours or so, I'm gonna go in and I'm just gonna do a couple of stretch and folds, similar to like if you're making a regular sourdough loaf. I'll bring you back tomorrow for the process of shaping the doughs and show you how I freeze them. Okay, I have my dough covered with a damp towel just so that it doesn't dry out. And I just wanted to say too, if you don't have a KitchenAid stand mixer and you bake a lot, you definitely should get one. It makes your life so much easier. Don't buy one full price. Look on Facebook Marketplace. They usually have a lot on there for a pretty good deal. I got this one basically brand new for $75 from Facebook Marketplace. Would I spend the full price on it, like the $300 or $350, whatever they are? Absolutely not. But it is really, really helpful to have. I still like to mix a lot of my doughs by hand. Even this one, after I took it off the mixer, I did mix it by hand for a little bit just to get the flour and the starter and stuff off of the bottom and make sure everything was mixed together really well. So I don't use this all of the time, but when I'm doing like bigger batch stuff or something with like a lot of ingredients, I just toss them in and it mixes them up perfectly. So highly recommend getting one if you bake a lot. When I do the stretch and folds tonight, I'll bring you back for that just so you can see it. That process helps develop the gluten structure and allows for like more elasticity of your dough. So it helps it roll out easier. So I'll bring you back tonight for that process. The dough is a little bit watery, so I'm just mixing it all together really good and then turning the bowl, pulling it up. That's a stretch and fold. And then you want to do that in one complete turn, basically. I've done it a couple of times already, which is fine, but you want to do it in one complete turn and then leave it to rest so that your gluten structure forms. So I'm just going to do it one more time since I have everything mixed together really well. And we're going to let this rest overnight. The elasticity is not quite where I want it to be, but I think after it rests overnight, by morning, we'll have much more elastic dough to do the stretch and folds with, and then we'll just let it rest for a little while. See you in the morning. Hey guys, welcome back. It's the next day. We let our pizza dough sit in the mixing bowl overnight and rise. And if you saw in that last clip, it definitely like doubled in size. That's what you want with your sourdough breads. So now I'm just gonna get this floured up so it's not super tacky as I'm rolling it out. And I'll show you how I portion it out into 8 pizza doughs. So I'm just gonna get it all rolled together in a good dough ball. I want to weigh it first because I like for my portions to be weighed out so that they're even in size and weight. So I'm going to get it into one big ball first, and then I have a bowl here that has some flour in it on our kitchen scale, and we're just going to weigh this whole thing. I could have done that while it was in the mixing bowl. I just didn't think about it at the time. Also, I did do another stretch and fold a few minutes ago, really just to release the edges of the dough from the sides of the bowl so that I could get it out a little easier. Don't come in here and start yelling. You do this every time, Sherry. I have our bowl on the kitchen scale. The scale is zeroed. So we're just gonna toss this whole thing in there and get an initial weight on it. So 1,839 grams, 1,839 grams. So I'm just gonna roll this out with a rolling pin, and then we're gonna separate it into 8 equal portions. I'm just gonna flour our rolling pin so that it doesn't stick to the bread. Then we're gonna roll this out a little bit. I'm not gonna roll it too much, just enough to kind of flatten it out to make it easier to cut into equal sizes. I just did the math for the 1839. And 1839 divided by 8 is about 230. It's 229.8. We're just going to round it up. So each dough is going to be about 230 grams. Like I said yesterday, that's enough for like an 8-inch personal size pizza. And then if I want a larger one, I just combine 2 of them, or sometimes we just make our own with the personal size pieces. So this looks like a good size to cut. I have my bench scraper here that makes everything easier with making dough, so I can just scrape it right up off of my mat here. This mat is great. This was recommended by Becky at Acre Homestead. If you haven't seen these before, they're amazing. I know you can flour your counter and just put your doughs right on your counter, but I really prefer to use these mats. It just makes the cleanup a lot easier. And it has all sorts of like measurements and things on here, so I really enjoy this. All right, so let's just cut it in half first. I don't want it to be sticking to the mat, so if we need to add extra flour, then we will. And then I'm gonna cut it in half again. So now we've got 4 medium-sized pieces, and then we'll go ahead and cut them into what looks like pizza slices to make the 8 portions here. And they may not be exact, which is why I'm going to measure them out first, and if we need to add to each one, then we will. Okay. So I still have my bowl here. I'm just going to zero the scale out and roll these up individually and see where we're at. So we want to be at about 230 grams for each one. Just roll them into a ball and stick it in there. So that's 257. I'm just going to take some out. You do not have to be super precise with these measurements. So that's 230.8. We'll go with that. I'm going to add this one here because this one looks a little bit smaller. So I'm just going to set these off to the side on my mat after I weigh them, and then I'll show you how I get these wrapped up and put in my freezer bag. That one's a little low, 192. Just add some more to it. Okay. Okay, we have all of our doughs here, so I have them all balled up into 8 equal portions. The weight of each ended up being between like 220 and 240, so I call that even enough. I'm gonna show you how I get these wrapped up and put in a freezer bag to have pizza anytime we want. I just have plastic wrap, and they should be well floured enough that I can pick them up. I want them pretty well floured before I put them in here. That way the dough doesn't stick really badly to the plastic wrap when we go to take it out of the freezer. So I just wrap them up into like a ball shape. Okay, so I have a freezer bag here, like a reusable Ziploc that I like to keep these in the freezer. When I want to make one, I'll just take 1 or 2 out, thaw them for a few minutes, and then just roll them out onto the pizza stone. And then we have fresh sourdough pizza. So I'm gonna get these bagged up in here. I already had 1 frozen dough left in here from the last batch that I made. I just added 7 wrapped ones. I kept 1 out because we're gonna make it for lunch right now. I'm really excited to have these stocked in the freezer because, like I said, we can just take 1 or 2 out whenever we want it. I have homemade pizza sauce. We usually have some kind of toppings that we can use. If we don't have pepperoni, we at least have like Italian sausage. We have a bunch of that in the freezer. We have some banana peppers, some jalapenos, some pickled things that we can put on it. But I always have a stock of homemade, home canned pizza sauce on my canning shelf downstairs. and then a freezer stock of sourdough pizza doughs. So it's really that easy to make sourdough pizza dough. There is just some wait time for the fermentation time for the sourdough. If you're baking or just learning how to bake with sourdough, just know that it's not a quick process. It takes time to ferment. So don't expect to be able to like make a sourdough recipe in one day. Unless you're adding active yeast to it as well, you can get things done a little quicker, but I just always use my sourdough starter and that's it. So everything that I make with sourdough is like a 24 to 48 hour process usually. But I really like having things that I can just pull out of the freezer quickly that are homemade. I know what the ingredients are that are in it, and sourdough is really good for you anyways. So I'm gonna get this pizza dough rolled out for our pizza for lunch, and I'll finish this video with just showing you how that turns out. Thanks so much for hanging out with me making the sourdough pizza doughs today. I still have a lot of sourdough discard in my fridge, so I'll probably make another batch or so. We usually keep like 8 or 10 doughs at a time, so when I see that I'm getting close to running out of those, we'll make some more. Thanks so much for supporting my channel. Like, subscribe, make sure that you're keeping up with all the videos. I've got some really fun ones coming soon. Bye guys.